Howdy folks, welcome to another episode of the Scannell Agenda. My name's Stephen J.F. Scannell, and this is my lovely bride, my lovely bride, Pam Scannell.
Hi.
And today's date is Thursday, August 23rd, 2018. The title of the show today is The Scannell Agenda on Steroids. I guess the Scannell Agenda is a collection of my projects that I work on. One of the projects that I do work on is Prayer and Pizza, Pam's show, Prayer and Pizza. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I daydream a lot and conjure up a lot of ideas constantly. You know, that's kind of what I do. So Prayer and Pizza goes big. Might be a good project. How would it go big? And we've been talking about this for a while.
Yep.
And I think the format for the show is good. In other words, you do the reading. And that obviously would be approved of by pastors and the community and the church community. Okay. And then the 1 to 10 things you're praying for. This again would be good things to be approved of by your church community, any church community. Actually, any group.
Well, I have confidence because I know God led us to do what we did today, so I don't need, like a pastor to okay it, say that.
Oh, well, you're I call you Pastor Palm Tree. You know, that's your nickname, one of your nicknames. So you've been to Bible school, so, and you're constantly in the Bible, so. No, this is a ministry, basically, this Prayer and Pizza, right? And so let's just say the format looks good and you want to expand it, and then you go to, let's say, the children getting involved, doing shows. What could be better than that, right? And then the pizza, we didn't have pizza at the end of the show, but we probably should have, right? But we were busy running around. I had the eye doctor appointment and we scurried over here. Anyway, we didn't get the pizza, but you're a connoisseur of pizza. You really are.
Looking for a good place.
So this is something that I think goes big. Prayer and Pizza goes big. That's on my plate to puff this show up and to expand it out to different people. I think that's a worthy.
Well, one of the first steps is getting it on YouTube. These last like 2 shows.
Yep.
Get it on YouTube. So that's a little task that we run into.
Yeah, we could use some technical help. On my show with my projects and everything. Boy, I could use some help with all this stuff I'm working on. My zone is what it is, which is design work. That's what I do. All right, let me get back to the name of the show, The Scannell Agenda on Steroids. Well, I've got this big, huge pile of design work that I do, design work or writing, and it's all in categories, and I want to get this all published and then patented at the same time. And the reason why I say patented too is because a lot of this stuff, I wouldn't want to just give it to the world. I want it to be in good hands. And some of it is, I have a military file and an automated military presence file, and that has to be segregated out because of the nature of that kind of thing. So calling all projects, there's about 250 categories that I work in. And so mostly I'm into these comprehensive systems. And today in the paper, and today's date is
23rd.
August 23rd, but today in the paper was an article on the Cape Cod Times, Falmouth's Wind 2 may be slow to go. And it's an article about these 2 windmills in Falmouth and different bureaucratic hurdles and problems they've been having. And it led me to keep thinking about, geez, we ought to do this. See, my idea for Horseshoe Shoal, that ground there, is to maybe expand it into some state waters and then use that ground as a test bed for models of the offshore wind, models of offshore wave, models of, let's say if we're going to build an eelgrass sod farm offshore, which is a project that I'm working on feverishly right now. Well, then if we're gonna build something huge and massive offshore that's very productive in many ways, then we need to model that up. We need to model it up with the computer modeling on paper and pencil, and we need to brainstorm it, and we need to be planning and doing and prototyping. And this is the ground for it, is Horseshoe Shoal. It's very unique ground. It's federal waters. So I proposed that a long time ago, that this ground should be used, and this real estate, it's in the middle of, it's right in between Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, and Cape Cod. It's federal waters. It's basically an anomaly, it's called. It's, you don't find these little federal waters within state waters too often. And way back when, I said, you know, and a lot of people were saying, this ought to be turned over to the state, but that never happened. So there's been a bit of rigmarole about that whole thing. So the Falmouth Wind 2, we don't need all these little toys inshore and on land, and they have caused a lot of problems. What we do need is to scale up our offshore wind, wave, and reef systems. We don't even have the reef systems going with these. They do in Europe, but over here we're not doing it. But I've been designing this stuff since I was a teenager. Since I was a teenager, I've been working on this. So let's just say we're using 10% models for the Horseshoe Shoals area. Wouldn't that be smarter than trying to go out and build, you know, the full-scale models of offshore wind and wave out on Georges Bank, the Grand Banks, which is off of Canada, in between United States and Iceland out there, the Grand Banks. And also there's all kinds of acreage that's near shore, offshore to Nantucket, Martha's Vineyards. We have a huge shelf. A lot of people don't understand that geographically, but the East Coast has a big sandy shelf in the ocean, and that is shallow water until you get to the continental shelf or the drop-off, where your canyons are. It drops way off. So there's a lot of money to be made for energy, a lot of money to be made in fisheries on this shelf. And as you know, I think it's my specialty to do fisheries management system designs. But getting back to the 10% models. Now this eelgrass sod farm that I have on my plate now, it's changing and evolving, but it's got Venturi windmills. And a Venturi windmill is a windmill with a cowling or a scoop, a big scoop that catches the wind, it funnels the wind, pressurizes the wind, and increases the speed or velocity of the wind right where you want it at the blades. And so that coupled with wave generators, and that also coupled with tire reefs, and all that I've learned designing the Georges Bank mega mills, which is different than your Venturi mills. They're different systems. And that coupled also with the sewage system designs and the water system designs, they all come to bear on this eelgrass sod farm design. But I would say let's model it up on the computer and draw it up using artist renderings, et cetera, and then let's build actually 10% models and work and watch it work etc. So, excuse me, we have to scale up these systems that we model. So very importantly is to separate out something that is scalable from things that are non-scalable, such as these little wind farms that are off of the vineyard now, and they're touted as a big deal. They're not, because they're really not scalable. My designs are scalable because, most importantly, is the fact that when we design for offshore energy, we design multiplicities of systems altogether. And we design with hydrogen in mind, because that is a thing that is our future, the hydrogen economy. It's a fantasy right now, but we're going to make it the reality. And then compressed air. And then oxygen-rich compressed air, I call that ORCA. And since we are cracking water apart and giving it its hydrogen component and its oxygen component separately, then we'd mix the oxygen with some compressed air, and then we'd send that inshore, and it's very useful. Of course, the hydrogen is very useful. That's what I call frozen electricity. So when we're talking about scalability of a wind farm, wave generator farm, reef system, with my designs, we're really talking about scalability, because we're not trying to transmit the electricity that we produce immediately to the need onshore, to Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, the East Coast here. There's a lot of need for electricity, and we can supply all that need with the wind. And we can do it in short order. We can scale this up pretty good, pretty quickly. Now the pipes come on shore and they go into the green grid T, GGT. Now that is the old tripe system, track pipe. Okay, and it's important to note that if someone says they've solved the energy crisis, okay, what's the backbone of that statement? The backbone of that statement that Stephen J. F. Scannell says, I solved the energy crisis. Okay, your next question is, how so? How did you solve the energy crisis? By what means did you solve? What method? Yeah, how'd you do it? So, well, I was designing offshore. Okay, get to the point. What's the point? The point is energy storage and energy shipment. See, with this green grid monorail system, we have energy storage in the pipes. Since the hydrogen goes in the pipes, comes in from offshore, goes into the monorail system, and is contained in the pipes, that's storage, because there's a lot of monorails going everywhere in the world, everywhere in the country. So that's a lot of storage. It's in the pipe or in the can. Your energy is stored. Now you have high-powered compressed air. And some of these, there'll be a multiple of different pressures in different pipes. But that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Because to hold up a monorail system, a transit system which carries roads, could carry housing, could carry water, sewage, and everything else, you need a lot of structural strength. And bundled pipe is the way to go. So that's why I've solved the energy crisis. With a bundled pipe system, we have conquered energy, or green energy, specifically green energy, but any energy will go in. Okay, it doesn't have to be green. It could be nuclear. And some people say that's pretty green. Some people say it's not. Okay. Setting that aside, those are issues that can be set aside here, and we can say, yes, this solves energy storage, green energy storage. And yes, this solves green energy shipment. Now, currently we have electricity shipped on the easements through the high tension wires. That's how we ship energy right now. And, you know, oil and gas, it's all forms of different energy. So this is all new, it's all green. It's all green, folks, so step right up. So that's why I say I've solved the energy crisis. And I've tried to dovetail this into everything. All the projects, I've tried to dovetail them all together, like my clubhouse work or work with disabilities. I have tried to design for people with disabilities as a cornerstone in what I do. In other words, we all need work, you know. So I've tried to really, and as I redesign all the stuff that I redesign or design, this is not redesign, this is raw design work here. So hydrogen, compressed air, ORCA, oxygen-rich compressed air, does that solve? No, doesn't solve the energy crisis. But when you put that in a monorail pipe, yes, then it does. It's more of a synthesis of off-the-shelf items. Bundle them together properly, and there you go. That's it. So I didn't invent any perpetual motion machine, which is always the big joke. This perpetual motion machine, which is fantasy, I suppose, until someone actually proves it to me. It's a fantasy. That's a machine that makes its own energy and produces more energy than it, you know. So a PV cell, like the size of this desk here, that would not be, because you're using the sun's energy, so that would not be a perpetual motion machine. You're getting energy from the sun and transforming that energy into electrical energy. Those are all good systems that all work together. So the Scannell agenda on steroids will include the Hurricane Emily, our little boat, which I need to get busy rebuilding that, and I've gotten the new stringers are in it. I did that a long time ago. It's a very good solid boat. And I was gonna do just the Cullen board, but the more I think about it, I don't want the Cullen board. I want to set it up with a temporary Cullen board that can come on and off, but then I want it to be a camera boat, basically, with spuds that can anchor it in so the camera is not moving. So that, let's say we could go off Red River Beach or off a sandbar somewhere in Chatham, and then jack down the spuds, and then you've got your camera. You could actually interview someone sitting on their boat, and you know, that'd be quite a good time, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Ask the Boat Builder is another show that I want to do. That would be based at a shop. We could do a small shop here at the boat, at the TV studio. That'd be nice. Build a, I call it a pucky, a little skiff. That was something I built on Nantucket, a little rowboat. I've still got the transom for that. But the boat is at the dump. It's a wooden boat, but it doesn't have to be wood. Another thing I want to do is the Hyannis Honeymooners for travel and food also. You know, you're a good food critic.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, I was going to do this last and not least, Prayer and Pizza Goes Big.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but we already covered that. So I want to get into some more of my eelgrass sod farm. I call it ESF, eelgrass sod farm. And I keep coming up with different ways of doing it. And this is all based on all my work in the past on the clipboard. But even though it is on the clipboard, I have a lot of experience under my belt as a fisherman, as a boat builder, cabinet maker, you know, doing different jobs, working handyman jobs. So I kind of have a sense, a rough sense of what's going to work and what can be done. And I'll tell you, if you're a fisherman and you are chasing dreams and doing things that can't be done, you'll be out of business. It's like any other business too. If you're so hung up on delusional fantasies that you can't, you know, see reality from a hole in the wall, you'll be out of business. So the eelgrass sod farm is a good way to get us offshore. It's a component of a system offshore. Let's say 20 miles south of Nantucket. Out there. It's not too deep, it's not too shallow. It's just about right. It's a bunch of sand out there. It's not much out there. But it's important territory. Some people would argue on that point. But it's not like George's Bank. There are some areas that are just so good and pristine. But I wouldn't be afraid to go into George's Bank with some windmills either, having said that. But the thing George's Bank has going for it is that it is a bank and it does produce a lot of fish because it's got good tide flush and it's got good vegetation and it's shallow and it's like Mother Nature hit on all 8 cylinders. We wrecked it. We totally ruined it. That's why we're not bringing in codfish right now. And that's why I'm kind of disgusted about all these politicians pandering to fishermen, constantly pandering, you know, fishermen. I'm like, oh my God, you guys can't do reform. You just can't call on Steve Scannell and do some reform. You can't do it. You're so locked into this nonsense. You know, we used to have a lot of fish in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And before your dad was born and before my dad was born, you know, let's say in the 1920s,
Mm-hmm.
well, then the fishing was going downhill pretty fast because dragging came in the teens, let's say, in the 1910s and into the teens, or the yacht, you know, 1900, the power came in, power boats. And they started with these beam trawls, and then they worked their way up. And it was all well and good for a while because the demand wasn't there. They answered the demand pretty quickly, but then the freezers came in and the canning of lobsters, et cetera, came in, and the demand just, the demand caused a lot of degradation, you might say, a destruction of the ocean real fast. And then World War II came along, you know, and that put a damper on fishing, and that gave a little blip, I think, to the fisheries, because there weren't many boats out there. The subs would sink them, the German subs, and everyone was busy fighting the war, too. I'm sure there was some fishing going on. But I did read a book, and I want to present the whole book on dragging in the early Nantucket dragging. They would catch so much fish with a small boat that they had to worry about overfilling the net and then having to split the net with a knife, cut the net open and dump fish out. And then they could get the fish onto the boat with the winch the fish up onto the deck and pick the fish and put them down the hold. If they actually had to, that was a big worry back then, that they'd be catching too many fish. And back then they had smaller boats, smaller engines, smaller nets, but they would load the boat with fish. Go figure, right? The fish were there back then. So we need to pretty much bring back those days to the best of our abilities. Now that's where the fishery management comes in, and it ties into all these energy systems and transit systems. It's comprehensive work that I do. And basically it started with tire reef designs, I think when I was a teenager. You know, and I was watching Jacques Cousteau, and we had tire reefs on the Cape, and they were held together with chains, and that didn't work. So I kind of thought I could figure out something that would work or could work better, and I did over the years. It hasn't been experimented with and tried out, but I know it'll work. So that's my tire reef file is huge, and my eelgrass file is huge. And then I start a new project once in a while that uses a little bit of this and that, and this is what I like. I really like this eelgrass sod farm project because it uses everything that I've been doing. And you know, the eelgrass work that I've been doing lately uses the sewage systems, because with my new way of cultivating eelgrass, we start with sewage or urine-fed grass on land, and then we put that the sod into the ocean, and then we plug that with the eelgrass, and then the eelgrass dives into that under the proper circumstances, because that's all fertilized. And eelgrass underwater likes fertilizer. That's why eelgrass and scallops get along so well, because the scallop produces the dung for the eelgrass. And the eelgrass needs that because it needs to get ahead of the epiphytes, the stuff that grows, the slime that grows on the eelgrass blades. It needs to have a lot of energy to push out the new grass all the time. And it sloughs off, and you see it floating in racks on the water. Anyway, eelgrass, I'm fascinated with eelgrass and how to bring it back. Two more minutes. I'm fascinated with all these systems that dovetail. Like the eelgrass dovetails here with this Venturi windmill. And a Venturi windmill can be a low windmill with a big cowling. That's how to think of a propeller in a big cowling like this. And then that can take up a lot of acreage. And, and then your wave generators are attached to that. So you want the storms coming in because you'll be making money. With the wind, you'll be making money with the wave generators. And of course, that making money means hydrogen, compressed air, and then oxygen-rich compressed air. That's what money means to me. And then put into the monorail system. Solves the energy crisis very nicely, in fact, because if you get a ride on these systems that I designed, the Green Grid Transit, these are monorail systems, you're like riding on air. You said, oh, you don't want to do that above the treetops. I'm kind of afraid of that. But you conquer that. You'll do it, you go for a ride a few times, and you'll be all set. You won't be able to stay away from it. The views will be so beautiful. You'll be traveling along just above treetop height. It'll be like you're flying and gliding quietly. And you'll be able to do that in open air, sometimes closed. So anyway, that's the Scannell agenda. We got 1 more minute. Here's Dave giving us the 1 minute sign. You have anything to contribute here, honey? I know it's kind of late.
So.
What do you think about all this mess? There's a lot to it, isn't there?
There's a lot to it, yeah.